The early 20th century was an era not only of trenches and weapons, but also of incredible inventions, from giant zeppelins that bombed London to self-propelled howitzers and floating fortresses. Today, we will travel back to a time of strange machines and unusual weapons that changed the course of history, where technological progress went hand in hand with the mad ideas of engineers.
The story of unusual World War I weapons should probably begin with the Mark I tank, as it was the first tank in history used in combat, and it looked quite unusual. A tank on the battlefield at that time was something fantastic, but not for long. You are well acquainted with this specimen. I won't dwell on it in detail, but instead will show you the gun carrier Mark I, a British self-propelled howitzer based on the Mark I. Many of you have probably not heard of it. The gun carrier was developed to transport a 6-inch howitzer or a 60-pound gun to support infantry on the front lines. Another version was based on the Mark II tank. In this case, the gun was mounted at the rear. Two of these SPGs were converted. They were equipped with steam engines and special cranes. They were used in construction and for towing stuck tanks, but most often simply for transporting equipment and supplies through areas under fire, where porters in the open would have suffered heavy casualties. And it was in the role of armored transports that the gun carriers particularly excelled. They rarely fired their own guns. They delivered ammunition, spare parts, provisions, picked up the wounded, and returned. Imagine the trenches of World War I, mud, machine guns, and among them, a crossbow. Yes, this is no joke. The French sauterelle, or grasshopper, was a real crossbow grenade launcher created in 1915 by engineer Élie-André Broca. This strange weapon fired grenades, such as the British Mills bomb or the French F1, over a distance of up to 140 meters, lobbing them right into enemy trenches. The sauterelle was made entirely of steel. The bow had a spring steel construction with a steel cable. To fire, the crossbow had to be set at a 45-degree angle against the trench wall, which ensured maximum grenade range. Depending on the tension level, one could determine how far the grenade would be thrown, using a scale on the left side of the stock. A two-man crew operated it. After cocking, they would insert the grenade into the trough, pull the pin, and immediately press the crossbow's trigger to release the grenade. 4 shots per minute, and enemy trenches would fill with explosions. But accuracy was poor, and grenades sometimes fell back, threatening the shooters themselves. By 1916, the sauterelle was replaced by the more modern Stokes mortar. But this medieval grenade launcher remains a symbol of the inventiveness of trench warfare. These unusual watercraft with huge guns look threatening and unusual even for the early 20th century. Italian monitors, such as the Fa di Bruno and Alfredo Cappellini, were armed with 380mm and 305mm guns taken from unfinished battleships. They were low-profile barges with massive rotating turrets slowly gliding across the Adriatic. Their length rarely exceeded 60 meters. Their draft was only about 1.5 meters to maneuver in shallow waters, and their speed was a pitiful 2 to 3 knots, making them vulnerable to torpedoes and air attacks. However, their firepower, capable of hitting targets at distances up to 30 kilometers with armor-piercing shells weighing up to 800 kilograms, inspired real terror. These ships were built from available materials, often converted from merchant barges or even pontoons, giving them a primitive but intimidating appearance. Sometimes their hulls were reinforced with wooden panels to withstand the gun's recoil. In battles, for example during the 11th Battle of the Isonzo in 1917, monitors supported Italian infantry, shelling Austro-Hungarian fortifications in the Gorizia area, firing up to 50 shells a day.
One notable episode occurred when the Fa di Bruno accidentally damaged its own trench due to a fire control calculation error, becoming a legend among sailors. However, their weaknesses were obvious. The Alfredo Capellini sank in a storm in 1918 due to poor seaworthiness, and others quickly became obsolete after the war, turning into floating targets for new technologies. Nevertheless, the monitors left their mark as a bold adaptation of the Italian Navy to limited resources. This is the Schumann Armored Cupola, a strange weapon created by German engineer Maximilian Schumann back in the 1880s. In this compact cylindrical structure, weighing 2,200 kilograms, sat a 37mm or 53mm gun, protected by 40mm armor for the turret and a 10mm hull. It was transported by horses or on narrow-gauge railways and positioned in concrete nests where the turret protruded only 35 centimeters, hiding a crew of 1 or 2. The cupola could rotate 360 degrees, allowing it to fire on the enemy from all sides, and its gun could fire shells up to 3 kilometers. From 1914 to 1918, the Germans used it to fortify positions, especially on the Western Front, where it protected against infantry and early tanks. But its weakness, slow relocation, and vulnerability to artillery fire made it a rarity. Interestingly, Bulgaria and even Switzerland purchased these pillboxes, as they were called, due to their shape, and some served as late as 1947.
This image seems like it was created with 3D graphics in a retro-futuristic style, with notes of Star Wars, but it's a real photo from World War I. At the center of attention is a 37mm Maxim automatic cannon, reminiscent of a fantastical weapon from Wolfenstein or a blaster from a faraway galaxy. Developed by Hiram Maxim in 1889, this light automatic gun, weighing about 180 kilograms, could fire up to 300 rounds per minute, hitting infantry and even early aircraft at distances up to 3 kilometers. In other photos, it looks quite ordinary. Nevertheless, the gun was the world's first of its class and was widely used until the end of World War I. Initially created for Russia, it fell into German hands, where it was nicknamed Pom-Pom due to its characteristic firing sound. It was mounted on a tripod or wheeled carriage. In battles, for example on the Eastern Front in 1915, it became a nightmare for infantry, but proved powerless against tanks, and frequent jams due to its complex mechanism tarnished its reputation. After the war, its modifications were used in the Russian Civil War until the 1920s, and some specimens are still preserved in museums. The huge Zeppelin airship also looks very retro-futuristic, as if from a parallel universe. I can imagine the terror of citizens as this monster approached London, hovering in the night sky at 163 meters long and filled with 25,000 cubic meters of hydrogen. But in reality, it wasn't as impressive as it seems. Built in 1914, the LZ-38 became the first Zeppelin to drop bombs on the British capital on May 31, 1915, carrying up to 2 tons of explosives. Its maximum speed reached 96 kilometers per hour, but maneuverability was poor, and the crew of 16 risked vulnerability to incendiary bullets. During raids, the LZ-38 destroyed several houses and caused panic, killing 7 people in its first attack. However, by 1916, British fighters with Lewis guns began hunting them, and fire in the air became a frequent end for such airships. The LZ-38 itself was shot down on June 7, 1915, over Ghent. After the war, Zeppelins faded into the past, giving way to airplanes, but their image remained in culture
as an icon of a bygone era.
Who were these people in the photo? Gas workers? And it seems they're about to launch their cylinders. In fact, these devices, dug into the ground at a 45-degree angle, are nothing other than the Livens projector, or gas projector, a type of mortar used by Britain during World War I to attack enemy personnel. An electric detonator, a propellant charge, and a cylinder with gas or incendiary mixture were placed in the tube. Upon impact, the cylinder would rupture, creating a dense gas cloud. The range was about 1.5 kilometers. The projector was first used at the Battle of the Somme in 1916. Its massive salvos, up to 2,000 projectors at a time, created deadly traps for the enemy. The Germans called it the hissing death due to the sound of the flying cylinders, but they soon copied the idea, creating their own 180mm gas projectors. Despite being cheap and simple, the projector gave away its position with flashes and noise, becoming a target for artillery. By the end of the war, about 140,000 of these weapons had been produced, but after 1918 they became obsolete, giving way to new types of weapons.
Obviously, this photo shows an armored train, but its design also has notes of retro-futurism. The streamlined, armored hull and spherical turrets of its guns resemble a unit from a fantasy shooter. Built in 1916 in Odessa workshops, the Zamurets was a true fortress on rails, weighing 40 tons and armed with two 76mm guns on pedestal mounts, 12 machine guns, and even searchlights for night raids. Its armored body on two two-axle bogies protected the crew from bullets and shrapnel, and its engine allowed it to move without a locomotive, making it a unique machine for its time. Inside, it featured cork insulation and heating from exhaust gases, as well as periscopes and rangefinders. The Zamurets first saw action on the southwestern front, supporting infantry and attacking enemy fortifications. In 1918, it participated in the uprising in Odessa. Its fate was dramatic. By the 1930s, the car ended up in China, where it was captured by the Japanese. Despite its short service, the Zamurets became a symbol of Russian engineering ingenuity.
At first glance, this not quite clear structure reminded me of a suspension bridge span. But since it is a gun, one can make out its huge barrel in this image. This is the Paris gun, also known as the Kaiser Wilhelm Geschütz, or Colossal, a super long-range 210mm gun on a rotating carriage used by German forces in 1918 to shell Paris. This was truly a colossal structure for its time, with a barrel length of 34 meters and a weight of over 125 tons. It fired 94-kilogram shells to an incredible distance of up to 130 kilometers, using special ballistics, with barrel wear after 50 to 65 shots requiring replacement. From March to August 1918, the gun fired about 320 shells, sowing panic in Paris, including an incident where a shell hit a church during a service. It was hidden on a railway platform and camouflaged, but the Allies eventually discovered it, destroying it after the armistice. The uniqueness of the Colossal lies in the fact that it was the last word in artillery terror, but its complexity and high cost made it impractical. After the war, its blueprints were destroyed, and it remains a legend. The experience with this artillery system later served as the basis for the start of Germany's work on rocket weapons in the 1920s and 30s.
In my opinion, the creator of this aircraft was very envious of birds and wanted not only to fly, but to look like a bird. The Taube, dove, was developed in 1909 by Igo Etrich of Austria-Hungary and made its first flight in 1910. The name Taube, German for dove, perfectly describes its wings, curved and pointed like those of a soaring bird, with a wingspan of 14.3 meters. This monoplane weighed only 650 kilograms, was powered by a 100-horsepower Mercedes engine, and could reach speeds of up to 100 kilometers per hour, climbing to an altitude of 3,000 meters. The aircraft had a long service, first as an unarmed reconnaissance and artillery spotter, then as a trainer. It was the Taube that became the first bomber in history. In 1911, the Italians used it in Tripoli, dropping grenades from an aircraft for the first time. And in 1914, German pilots dropped leaflets and 2-kilogram bombs on Paris, causing panic. But its weaknesses were obvious: lack of armament, besides the pilot's pistol, and the fragility of its construction made it an easy target for new fighters. By 1916, the Taube was obsolete, giving way to biplanes. But its influence on aviation is immense. It inspired a future generation of engineers dreaming of flight.